Samson Tree's Mr. Cinema follows Joe Kong, an adamant left activist, as he navigates through the political turbulence and shifting colonial status of Hong Kong throughout the decades. We begin in the 1960s, a time of anti-colonial grassroots revolutions. Kong is characterized, like many Hong Kong leftists, as wholly dedicated to the communist ideology and challenging of British imperialism. Despite the avid leftist movement, Hong Kong does not experience a cultural revolution akin to its mainland counterpart. Instead, Hong Kong is expressed as a temporary space both by left-leaning mainlanders and right-leaning Taiwanese. It thus becomes an ambivalent host for two opposing ideologies to clash with each other. Because of this, the Hong Kong leftist movement becomes marginalized by the general public, almost to a comedic effect. This conflict becomes exacerbated with the introduction of Kong's son, Chang. Chang comes to represent the post-1967 youth's desire for transition, immigration, and Western modernity. At many points, Kong's leftism creates a significant obstacle for Chang, who becomes socially marginalized, separated from loved ones, and limited from job opportunities. Ultimately, the film demonstrates the incompatibility of leftist ideology within an increasingly capitalist and commercial nation. A revolution so distant from the mainland that it seizes any power at all. Kong often donates his savings towards friends and union institutions, but as a result dismisses the financial needs of his own family. Selflessness and communal efforts does more to hurt the family than help the greater community. However, does the film hail capitalism in return? Not necessarily. As well as poking fun at the Hong Kong leftist movement, the film exposes the capitalist exploitation of the everyday man, primarily through Chang, who is berated by his boss after taking an important phone call, and spends most of the film jumping from odd job to odd job in order to stay afloat. Towards the end of the film, Man is also shown to be out of luck despite a higher paying job and Western education. Capitalism is portrayed as cruel and unrelenting. Kong's wife, Ying, becomes imperative in exploring the dynamics between the left and the right by acting as the compromise in the middle. When Ying is forced to work as a housekeeper during the day, something that ultimately leads to her death, we put equal blame on the leftist money lending and the rightist money seeking. Her death symbolizes the inability for both to coexist in Hong Kong. It's important to note that the film doesn't villainize either Kong nor Chang. They're portrayed sympathetically, even with their flaws. The film views the pitfalls of both characters as fault of a greater system, and celebrates the overcoming of hardships. It commemorates the people of Hong Kong rather than a specific ideology or party. As a result, Mr. Cinema becomes both politically charged and politically ambivalent, just like Hong Kong itself. By the end of the film, we see a different Hong Kong from the one we began. Rather than transient, it becomes a permanent space for its inhabitants. We also see the decline of the leftist community when the cinema house shuts down, and members of the group either die of old age or adapt to the new times. At the same time, there is continuity. The use of parallel shots demonstrate the complexity of time, something that cannot be returned to but can be replicated. For this reason, Mr. Cinema is nostalgic. After all, film is the ultimate preservation of time, which is why the camera becomes a significant motif for Kong and Man alike. There is an acknowledgement of the fleeting nature of time, both for older generations stuck in the past and the youth uncertain for the future. And so, why is there nostalgia towards such a time of social turmoil? This is because British censorship before the handover desired to be as politically neutral as possible, so not to arise conflict in Hong Kong, especially towards expressions of mainland sentiments. This erased a close examination and homage to Hong Kong's history, and particularly of its marginalized leftist groups. But it is important to notice what the film excludes as well as what it includes. The Tiananmen Square, for example, is romanticized throughout the film as Kong's dream destination. Though, the film excludes any mention of the 1989 Tiananmen massacre. While the film tries to be politically ambivalent between the sides of the right and the left, there is a clear distancing of mainland Chinese politics that becomes salient through closer observation of the film. The documentation of history may be extensive, but it doesn't mean that it isn't sanitized. Nonetheless, Mr. Cinema is a sympathetic film, using the microcosm of the Zhou family to showcase common sentiments of Hong Kong from the turbulent 60s to the turn of the century, exploring the tensions of continuity and change to negotiate a Hong Kong identity that transcends political parties, generation, and time.